Like moths to a flame, you've thrown caution to the wind for a glimpse into our world. Well, now you're in it.
Welcome to Effed Up Stories.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight, we're a bit on a developing story. I've actually watched or read several articles that have sprung up in the last 24 hours. It has to do with the pyramid that the Mars rover have captured on Mars. So the big deal here is that we might finally have the smoking gun to alien life on other planets. Big deal. Before we jump into that, I want to tell you guys that we are covering a lot of fan submissions. You've seen that lately. And if you have an effed up story or picture, we'd like to have it. You can send that to us at our official website. It's effedupstories.com, EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. Go to the menu, click on submissions, fill out the form, hit submit. I'll get it on the website. We'll get it in a podcast. And something that we're going to be doing in the next couple weeks will be podcasts on near-death experiences, and one on, phantom phone calls. You know, like you get a phone call from a relative, you speak for a bit, you don't really realize anything's amiss until the next day you found out that they had died. They were dead the time that they were talking to you. So if you have stories on near-death experiences or phantom phone calls, even like strange phone calls, like I've heard people gotten calls from what sounded like demons and shit like that. If you got that stuff, we want it, and we'll get it into our coming podcast in the next couple of weeks. So again, if you have that, get to our website, submit that to us, effedupstories.com, and we'll get it out there. And with that having been said, spread that shit on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Google+, whatever, because you might have a neighbor in your apartment building on your Facebook. You don't even know her. She's just an acquaintance, and she might have the most fucked up story you ever heard, and she'll only know to send us that story if you put it there and she sees it, and blah, blah, blah. So you never know who's going to see this stuff. Get it everywhere. That's how you get our shows. That's how we get our shows to you, is from you guys submitting your stories. So the more people that see that stuff and get their stories into us, the more content we can give to you guys. So get that out there. And with that said, to the topic of the evening on the pyramid on Mars. So, as we all know, NASA has been exploring Mars remotely they're almost like remote control cars, obviously a lot more sophisticated, but they're called the Mars rovers. They control them remotely from here on Earth. Anyway, in the past couple days, a very interesting development came to light, and what it is, now this picture was actually taken on May 7th of this year, but it publicly came out in a document, I believe it was in June. Anyway, the camera on the NASA's Mars rover, and this is the rover named Curiosity, managed to catch an image. And I mean, I've seen this image. you can see all the rocks and debris around it. This image is very, the lines are very symmetrical, is very clear. It very much resembles one of the great pyramids that we have here on Earth in Egypt. So,
well, there's no denying that it is a pyramid, right? The question is it a pyramid shape created through random erosion and geological activity, or is it one that was created through intelligent design?
well, and that seems to be the thing that everybody is leaning on, and I'll address why people are thinking that in a moment. But the concept of pyramids on Mars, that's not a new concept. That's been floating around for quite a while in quite a few different pictures that have come out. There are not only pictures that appear to be of pyramids, but there are pictures of what appears to be statues who, interestingly enough, feature human and animal faces. Now, that's not unlike what we have in Egypt. I mean, we see these, their statues and, rock carvings, and they do share the combination of human and animal shapes.
And that, for that matter, ancient sites around the world.
So, I mean, that's an interesting... I mean, how the hell do you get that on Mars, right? And, not only have they seen that stuff, but, I mean, they got drawings carved into the surface there that look like the profiles of our primates, right? So, the difference between those pictures that are floating around on the internet and what we're speaking about tonight is the perspective and clarity of this picture that the Mars rover had just gotten. So you might ask yourself, we typically cover the paranormal, so what makes this effed up, right? Well, what makes this effed up is the obvious ties to alien life, right? I mean, this is not the first time that man has captured something that looks man-made on Mars, but they've mostly been to a degree debunked with the advancement in technology. For example, anyone who follows government conspiracies regarding alien life may recall the face on Mars. Now, the face on Mars, this whole thing goes back to the 70s when the Viking spacecraft, that was sent up there, and it reached Mars in July of 1976. And part of its mission was to orbit the planet and snap a ton of pictures so that scientists could best plan the landing site for the Viking 2 spacecraft, which was already sent and weeks away from getting there. So, the Viking had been orbiting the planet, taking literally thousands of pictures. And of course, one of these pictures came back and it showed a region that was approximately a mile long in the northern desert Cydonia region. And it very much appeared to be that of a humanoid face. And you can go Google this. It really did, or does, that picture that's floating around, it really does look like a humanoid face. And so naturally, once this picture got out, it became the focus of a lot of speculation, particularly among conspiracy theorists and those interested in the notion of aliens and life on other planets. It's been this constant focal point of speculation. So now with the Mars rovers up there, we have this perfect opportunity to go check this stuff out. And of course, that's really not what they've been doing. NASA's never really did believe that. I mean, they always said that they believed that it was just, conveniently placed rocks and motion blur, right? I mean, the low resolution pictures.
Pareidolia, I believe they call it.
Yeah, when people see faces. The
ability of the human mind to create an image of an animal or a human face or whatever. Out of nothing. And
that's a real thing. You and I both know it because, we've been sent pictures by people who are convinced that something is a face of something. And, honestly, we look at stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we believe in the paranormal. I mean, we're strong believers in the paranormal. We've had paranormal experiences. But every time we look at these things, I mean, we do look at it with skepticism as well. Like we have to look at it logically and rule out things before we believe. I mean, most of the stories that we tell you guys, I mean, we give it to you open and honestly as we've been given the story. We don't always 100% believe in the story we're even telling you. I mean, that's really on your, it's up to you guys to make up your mind. And we just put it out there. You guys decide, right? So,
in fact, that human face, at the face of Cydonia, as they call it, I've even seen it depicted with as a lion's face, as instead of a human face. So I mean, different people see different things.
Yeah, I mean, and
then
that's
later with higher resolution imagery, it's only a matter of looking at the latest satellite imagery that we received of that area of Cydonia, that you could get how somebody would get a face out of it. There's some bumps and ridges there that you could make kind of make out to be a face, but it most definitely isn't a enormous whatever mile by half mile sculpture.
No, and that was one of the things when NASA finally did get those clearer, better, up-to-date pictures of the Cydonia region. Of course, the face wasn't there. I mean, you could clearly see that it was, just cobbled together. It was a combination of what appeared to be, low-resolution pictures and blur, right? I mean, it was just a perfect storm to create that image. And NASA, very proudly used that to, reaffirm their initial statement that no, this was not an alien face in the Mars. We said that from the beginning. Here's proof. But there are still people that believe that is a cover up, and I mean, there's always going to be those two schools kind of thought of these different aspects.
And to be fair to the conspiracy minded of us who do believe that there are NASA cover-ups. I mean, there have been ex-NASA employees who have, left NASA or years later from after working there have said, strange things happened at NASA. The people weren't, not everybody was privy to certain information. Only certain people had access to these images as soon as they appeared. There has been a steady trickle of people who were officially, I don't have a list in front of me, but there are lists of people, and you can go out and search for yourself, who did officially work for NASA and who later have made statements. Some of them have been more cryptic than others. And I've even just this past, 3 months ago, came across a very technical but interesting article written by somebody who claimed to have worked on the programming, compiling the programming for one of these rovers, and that they found code hidden in the base code for the rover that seemed to indicate that there were devices on the rovers that were transmitting information to other receivers, encoded information. And that through the course of this person's investigation, there were strange happenings as they kind of got closer and closer to the stuff. And though he tried to hide his tracks, it appears that somebody kind of caught wind that he was sniffing around, or that somebody was sniffing around. And in fact, an individual had their home and office raided. It wasn't the guy who was actually doing the searching, but when he found out that this guy in his office had his home ransacked and had his office ransacked, and that a bunch of computers had been, taken apart, and they noticed that cables weren't connected properly, that obviously that there was somebody snooping around. So there's what the point I'm trying to make, I guess, without all the rambling, is that there is a history, at least for the conspiracy folks like ourselves, of official NASA employees questioning the company line.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the reality is that there are things that go on at NASA that is very much like Area 51, and that the information is compartmentalized. Like, if you don't need to know something, you don't, right? I mean, it's...
And that's strange for an organization that's supposed to be a civilian organization.
Well, you got to look at it in a different way, though. I mean, NASA would be an obvious company that, you know, the government, which we all know is shady, right, would want to work with, because especially regarding top secret space technology, weaponry, and of course the search for alien life. So why is that such a big deal? Well, for one thing, when we're discussing weaponry, I mean, weaponizing space and just weapons in general, you know, that's a government military. I mean,
that's usually, I believe, that's usually left to Navy Space Command.
Okay.
I mean, they have their whole secret space when I say secret space program, I'm not talking about the black triangles. Well, I am and I'm not. There's the secret space program that everybody believes in, because obviously the Navy is going to have stuff that they don't want the Chinese and the Russians to know about. But at the same time, of course, there's a belief in a deeper, darker secret space program there.
Okay.
But, I mean, obviously the Navy Space Command is going to have aircraft, and they have, there has been some acknowledgement that they do have spacecraft that the public don't know a whole lot about. When they launched the last one, they only announced the launch, I think the day before or the day it launched. And, that was a big mystery to a lot of folks. So,
Okay, well, like, even given that, right? I mean, you throw that onto the Navy Space Command. The other aspect is, the proof of alien life. I mean, of course, we know the government's interested in that. I mean, we've done shows that spoke about, the government involvement with the search for alien life, even possible deals that they had, with aliens, right? So
the whole Eisenhower thing.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that that's a thing, right? So obviously NASA is the top choice. NASA's got the budget, it's got the funding, got the research, got the history. They're so well integrated with that stuff. And why is it such a big deal? Well, besides the idea of knowing that we're not alone in the universe, it would completely change our outlook on history, our origins, our even religion. Like, it would turn our current beliefs and systems on their head. The theory, that the shock would be so extreme, it would make people hysterical. I mean, people, they fear people would riot. It would be chaos. But honestly, I mean, personally, I wonder if anybody but a minority group would even care. I mean, I almost picture people are so desensitized and self-absorbed, I almost feel like they'd hear it and they'd think to themselves, well, how about that? And just hop back on their Facebook.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree with you there. I definitely see, whatever it is, 10, 15, 20, 40, 50, 100 years from now, when, extraterrestrial life is confirmed in whatever capacity, right? Once it's confirmed, I think we'll have a whole generation of very disappointed scientists who just stand there with their jaws hanging open, completely aghast at the non-reaction from the public. Everyone would be like, yeah, no shit. We've been watching movies about this for 100 years, and reading books. Sure, H.G. Wells wrote books about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't even as fantastic as the books I read, right? It's kind of mellow and laid back,
little ho hum, oh, they're whether it's bacteria or the, as they say, little green men. I think you're right. I think there will be a group of people like ourselves that will be jumping up and down and pointing a finger in all of our family's face and saying, see, I told you, see. But then there's going to be everyone else. And then we'll go to bed and we'll wake up the next morning. We'll go to work and we'll continue paying our taxes and our phone bills and our light bills and playing video games. And
nothing will have changed.
Exactly.
Right. But I think that still is, the fear that the government has, or who knows, maybe that's the U.S. and Canadian culture, but maybe it's different over in other countries. Maybe they would care over there, right? So I mean, that's something.
Well, it's funny because North America, the North American governments, and well, particularly the United States governments. So we have the Canadian government, the U.S. government, and the Mexican government. That's North America. So Canada, we've posted a lot of our UFO files. Mexico has reported on some high-profile UFO things, but the U.S., they really clamp down on that, right? If a pilot makes a UFO report, rather than investigating what this pilot's seen out there, I mean, geez, the guy's up there, he's sitting in the front seat. If he says he's seen something and had to move his plane to go around it, don't lock him up in a loony bin. Because that's traditionally what's happened, right? And that's what we hear from military people.
Well,
right?
That discredits them and just shuts the issue out of.
So exactly, it's a very they clamp down on it. Very
just by doing
very
that,
draconian.
Right? I mean, it shuts their credibility out because they're in a loony bin. It doesn't even matter if it happened. It doesn't matter if what they're saying is 100% true. Is they're labeled a nut. And, what the government media tells you, what you see on TV is what you're inevitably going to believe. I mean, that's the way it works, right?
So in this image, what do we see here? Like in the raw image, we're looking at a hill, right? There's a bit of a hill, and we have this, it's a pyramid, right? That's the geometrical shape of this thing. Is a pyramid.
What sticks out about it is that there's all kinds of rocks and debris around it.
Yes,
and this is so much clean. It's symmetrical. It's very finely shaped. It's very distinctive. I mean,
there's straight lines, right angles, and it's very clean. Like you look at the surface. I mean, it's not the highest quality photograph, right? But if you look at the face of it, it's relatively smooth.
Well, the interesting thing, and this is something that I read in one of the articles, is that, the way that we tell the difference between man-made things and naturally occurring or developing things is that nature has a way of randomizing the shape. And, like, there's a certain, you can see, like, where rain would fall, how it would erode in like a smooth circular pattern, or it would be more randomized, whereas this is very clear. Like you just don't find naturally pyramid shaped rocks. I mean, that's just not it's not symmetric enough to be that finely detailed like that. And so that's one of the red flags here, or at least the points that people make to reaffirm that this is actually a man-made object. Now, as to the object itself, people are saying, I mean, this is a pretty clear shot. It's pretty close. People are saying that it's about the size of a small car, and you're thinking, well, that's obviously not a pyramid. But what they're also saying is that it doesn't look like the whole pyramid. It looks like the tip of it protruding through the the desert floor. Actually,
and not all pyramids are the size of the pyramids at Giza. There's lots of examples of pyramids being used as guide stones. I think is one of the things that I read that especially in deserts and all throughout the Middle East, that these car-sized pyramids were used as guide stones to guide travelers through the desert.
That's an interesting detail as well.
So it doesn't, just because it's a pyramid doesn't mean it has to be this monolithic structure. And also, I mean, look, you look at the three pyramids at Giza. What are they all missing? They're all missing the tip. They're all missing the capstone.
And
right?
that's what other people said, is that this could be the capstone.
Whether it's attached to the rest of the pyramid or just sitting, like, to me, when I look at the raw photograph, and this is just myself, obviously, we're dealing with a couple of different things here, right? Scale, perspective, we just can't get from a photograph because we're not physically there. So the raw photograph has the stone on kind of a angle. Like it's on a hill. And the hill, it's not super steep, but it looks like it's on like a 45-degree angle a bit. And so you have this stone kind of jutting out of the side of this hill, and it to me in that raw photograph, it doesn't look like it's a vertical structure that's connected to the ground beneath and buried, right? It looks like it's maybe sitting on the surface, or part of it's been detached. Now, the other scenario here is that the rover is on an angle, and what we're looking at, because you'll see a lot of photographs where it's cropped and people have rotated the image a little bit so the pyramid looks like it's pointing straight up. But I do believe from the raw image, it does appear to be, pointing off to the right. We'll say if you're looking straight at it, the tip is pointed off to the right several degrees, quite significantly. Well, so I think in some cases it's being misrepresented in a way. But again, it's hard to tell because we're not there. We don't have the perspective. Hell, the whole rover could be up on two wheels, right?
Well, the interesting element, I guess, is that these comments about symmetry and, the theory that it's a capstone, that the symmetry suggests that it's man-made, is coming from scientists because, of course, this being out there and such a big deal right now, we got all these different scientists looking at it, analyzing it, speculating as to what they think it is. And, of course, we also have the conspiracy theorists who are jumping on this as the smoking gun that finally, NASA took away that Mars phase from us, but now we got this, right? But they do have something, to go on for this. I mean, there's a
yes, there's a very important little caveat to the whole thing, isn't there?
Yes, because the pictures apparently, they were taking at intervals between 20 and 30 seconds apart.
So they're rattling off image after image after image. And we know this from timestamps on the raw image data.
Exactly. And then apparently, at least the word is, that NASA stopped the image feed after, very momentarily after that image got out. Right? So
and even if they didn't stop the feed, they certainly didn't. And now, isn't this just totally ironic for a rover on nuclear-powered smart car? Because that's the size of this friggin' thing, right? It's about the size of a smart car. It's nuclear-powered, and it's called flippin' Curiosity. But it could, that's the part that really grinds on me, is that this thing is called Curiosity. And it couldn't be less curious about anomalies. It's like, oh, let's look at this flat expanse over here instead of this thing that looks just like a flippin' pyramid.
Or the face. Why not go to the Cydonia region and finally once and for all up close get a picture of this area and debunk it, if nothing else. So if this is true, if NASA did stop the image feed, right? I ask, why would NASA withhold the pictures for any other reason than there's some kind of obvious genuineness to the pictures? And I can only think of two reasons. One is that NASA doesn't even know what it is yet, but just to be careful, they're going to cut off the feed so that they can go and investigate and figure out what they're dealing with. Number two, it is what it looks like, and NASA and or the government does not want anyone to know about it.
Somebody in a black suit walked in, hit the little red button, and said, all right, everybody, early day, head home to your families. I got to talk to the administrator,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's no shortage of, government shutdown stories or cover up, right? I mean, they permeate our lives. I mean, government's everywhere. We pay taxes. They're in our schools. They're in our hospitals. They're everywhere. So it's not really fair to say all government, but there's, a handful of upper level echelon folk who, they are on the need to know basis. They know the big picture that most of us are missing, right? So just to discuss a couple of theories, forget about the cover-ups and stuff like that for a second, and just to discuss a couple theories about life on the red planet, right? Some people believe that Mars was actually once a home for a highly developed civilization, kind of like ourselves right now. But at some point, an Armageddon type event had destroyed the planet, and they believe this happened between 11 and 12,000 years ago. And they also believe that this is the same event that destroyed Atlantis here on Earth. And to further run with, conspiracy theory fever, some believe that a couple aliens on that planet had survived and they had come to Earth after the catastrophe. And if we're going to buy into that, that leads into a whole lot of other conspiracies. For example, did those aliens play a role in humanity? Are they related or somehow tied to the reptilians? Are they, did they make our pyramids here? Are they the Illuminati? I mean, you could really take any one of...
You could run with these for days. But I think my personal favorite for myself, and has been for years, and I'm not going to say this is a belief of mine. I don't believe in anything. I open myself to the possibility of all things. I let everything be possible because I know too much about science to say any one thing is impossible. And I've had too many strange paranormal experiences that, just throw the word impossible right out the window. But the one theory that really intrigues me, and I think that I would not be at all surprised if one day we find out that the aliens from Mars are us, that at some point there was a thriving civilization, a race of creatures on this nearby planet, perhaps going farther back than we ever thought before. That the human line, the human lineage reaches back much further than what is commonly believed. And that we actually originated, at least in part, on the red planet. Well, what we now call the red planet, Mars. And at some point, yes, there was some kind of catastrophe. Maybe it was a slow catastrophe. It was something, oh no, we're losing our magnetosphere. We're losing our atmosphere. Our magnetosphere is too weak. The magnetic field of our planet cannot retain or cannot stop the bombardment of cosmic rays, and it is constantly eroding our atmosphere. We need to find a new home. And maybe, just maybe, they were in the lucky position of having a sister planet nearby that was undergoing its own changes, and had become habitable. And maybe, just maybe, a handful or maybe more of refugees, we'll call them, left Mars and traveled to the planet Earth to colonize and become the myriad of peoples that we call the human race today.
Well, see, I thought that same thing when I was thinking about this whole thing that's going on now. And we have, what appears to be pyramid. I mean, they've said they had pyramids up there forever with photographs. But again, this is a much clearer picture that the rover took.
And not a satellite top-down image. I mean, you can't really tell much.
Exactly. And if it's true, I mean, it's uncanny that they have a pyramid up there and we have them on Earth, right? I mean, that's a very specific. It's a very specific structure. So
yes, and I know and this is the devil's advocate argument, of course, is that. Well, of course, any society would build a pyramid because it's the only shape that can support that kind of, that kind of weight, that kind of mass, the weight distribution and blah, 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 blah. But like you said, it's such a, why didn't they just build mounds? Why pyramids? Why didn't they just build little structures rather than these huge monolithic shapes? And if this thing really is just the size of a car, well, then they could have built it any shape they wanted. Well, they chose a pyramid.
Right, and not to mention the other photographs that people say are of statues, combining human and animal shapes. Again, this is a very prominent thing that happens in Egypt culture. Right back to the stone carvings and stuff like that, like way before. So one can't help but draw the parallelisms, especially now after finding this right now, a clear photo right now on Mars. So if you buy into it that far, you really do have to look at the possibility that they did come down here and that perhaps they are,
Well, there are so many strange inconsistencies with human prehistory. We just appear in the timeline. I mean, that's you look in some anthropological texts and they use these words that almost seem sensational, right? Like humans appear 200 to, in some extreme views, and this is considered extreme, 400,000 years ago. That's a blink. 200 to 400,000 years ago. That's a friggin' blink. Dinosaurs were here for millions and millions and millions of years. And I mean, that was 65 million years ago. And then all of a sudden, a primate just walks off the savannas of Africa, starts farming and herding cattle and building houses and creates language and mathematics and geometry and science and, eventually reaches out to the stars, all in 200,000 years. Where are the shark scientists and the dinosaur scientists and all this? I mean, sharks have been around for, 70 million years, 80 million years or longer. Alligators, crocodiles, all these things had immense periods of time to evolve, we'll say. There's what's stopping them from going through that magical process that we went through. And then, out of nowhere this record that we seem to have, this archaeological record, we go from, tree swingers to walking the plains and as hunter-gatherers. And then, again, out of nowhere, in the blink of an eye, and these are all words that you'll see in anthropological texts, in the blink of an eye, out of nowhere, we begin civilization. There's lots of cause to think that there may have been some kind of outside influence, and the whole alien astronaut theory, maybe we were the alien astronauts. Maybe there were two human families, maybe whatever process, maybe, who knows, somebody dropped humans off here and dropped them off up there, and there was a migration. There's so many possibilities.
So essentially, if we are our own, space ancestors,
our own space grandpas.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It reminded me of Futurama. It's like, Mr. I am my own grandpa. right? So that's exactly what I was thinking. There you have it. What do you guys think? Are we our own space astronauts? Are we our own visitors? Are we evolved from aliens from Mars? Is that what they found? Is our old culture or signs of our culture on Mars?
Have we discovered the remnants of an ancient civilization?
That was truly us.
that was actually us.
Right? So some really interesting food for thought, and I think that over the next little while we're going to see some developments that's either going to outright debunk it, or maybe more will appear and it'll quickly and silently be swept under the rug.
Which I think is more likely.
Yeah, me too.
If they go after it, right, then they're just legitimizing, the conspiracy viewpoint. And they can never do that.
Yeah, they'd rather be wrong and just, yeah.
For all you, ancient astronaut folks or extraterrestrial believers, or for all the people who think NASA stands for never a straight answer, definitely keep your eye on this, but don't lose heart. I mean, we, as a popular TV show coined many, many years ago, the truth is out there. We're in a galaxy with trillions of stars, and we looked out through the deep space Hubble field. And if you haven't seen this image, just go Google it, the deep space Hubble field, and see every spot of light in that image is a whole other galaxy filled with billions and trillions of other stars, each star having anywhere from 1 to 100 planets, and any planet having 1 to 50 moons. So, I mean, there has to be life out there. Whether we find it close to us or far away, hang in there.
Yep. I think that about sums it up. And again, if you guys have an effed up story of your own on the paranormal, or you have pictures or video, you can get that to us at the official website, effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And we're specifically, in the next couple of weeks, looking for stories on near-death experiences and phantom phone calls. So if you have experienced that or know someone who has, get that into us on the website. And again, just by spreading this stuff on social media, we're a lot more likely to get those submitted stories. So get to it. That way we can have more content to give to you guys. And with that said, we hope you catch us next time.
Thank you very much for listening. Have a great night.